Have you ever looked at human history? All the wars, the revolutions, the empires rising and falling, and just wondered, is there any point to all this madness? Well, one German philosopher, Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, looked at that exact same chaos and gave a resounding yes. He believed there was a grand plan. So let's get into it.
And this is really the core question, isn't it? Is history just one random thing after another? Or is there some kind of hidden pattern, a force, pushing everything forward? Hegel was convinced it wasn't just a jumble of facts. For him, it was a story, with a beginning, a middle, and a definite end. A story that, believe it or not, is purposeful and something we can actually understand.
Okay, so to really wrap our minds around this huge idea, we're going to break it down. Here's the plan. First, we'll look at the revolutionary world Hegel was living in. Then we'll uncover his so-called secret pattern of history. We'll figure out what makes it go, the engine behind it all. We'll see what he thought the final goal was, and then tackle his really unique idea of freedom. And finally, we'll grapple with his very complicated legacy.
All right, first things first. To get Hegel, you have to get the world he came from. And honestly, it was a world being completely torn apart and rebuilt.
I mean, think about it. The French Revolution just obliterated centuries of tradition. And right after that, you have Napoleon's armies marching all over Europe, literally tearing down old feudal kingdoms. To a lot of people, it must have felt like the world was ending. But to Hegel, this wasn't just chaos. This was the painful, violent birth of something new. And it needed a whole new way of thinking to make sense of it all.
So, what was Hegel's big answer to all this chaos? He said that under the surface of all these crazy events, there was a hidden intelligence, a kind of logic pulling the strings.
And this is an incredible story that really gets to the heart of it. In 1806, Napoleon's army is rolling through town, and Hegel literally sees the emperor riding by. But he doesn't just see a general or a conqueror. No, he sees, and he calls him this, the world's soul on horseback. He saw a man who had no idea he was actually carrying out the grand plan of history itself. And that really is the core of his entire philosophy. History has a direction. It isn't random. It's moving towards a specific destination, and it's being guided by a kind of higher reason. It's not just a bunch of disconnected stories. For Hegel, it's one single, massive story. So, who's the main character in this epic story? Hegel calls it the world spirit, or sometimes just the idea. Now, try to think of it like this. It's the collective mind of all humanity, slowly becoming self-aware over thousands of years. And it uses entire nations and even great individuals like Napoleon as its tools to achieve its goals. Okay, so how exactly does this world spirit push history along? Well, it's definitely not a smooth, straight line. It happens through conflict, a very specific, structured kind of conflict. Hegel calls this engine the dialectic, and it has this three-step rhythm. It's simple, really. First, you have the thesis. That's an existing idea, the status quo, say, an absolute monarchy. But then, that very idea creates its own opposition, the antithesis, like a new call for total individual freedom. And the clash, the conflict between these two, that creates the synthesis, a new reality, like a constitutional monarchy, that takes the best parts of both and moves society to a higher level.
Right, and this is the key. For Hegel, progress isn't about one side just crushing the other. It's a fusion. The old way isn't totally wiped out, and the new idea doesn't just start from scratch. The valid parts of both the thesis and the antithesis get merged into something better, something more developed. And guess what? That new synthesis, it just becomes the new thesis, waiting for its own challenger, and the cycle starts all over again.
So where is this all going? This endless cycle of thesis, antithesis, synthesis. What's the end game? What's the final stop for the world spirit's journey? For Hegel, the answer was crystal clear and, well, pretty controversial.
And here it is. This is wild. For Hegel, the ultimate expression of reason, the highest point of freedom on this planet, is the modern, rational nation-state. It's not just a way to organize people. He saw it as the physical form of the world spirit's progress. It's the march of God in the world.
This belief that the state is the goal of all history led Hegel to write what is probably one of the most debated and most misunderstood sentences in the history of philosophy.
The rational is actual, and the actual is rational. Now hold on, this does not mean that everything that happens is good or morally right. What it means is that whatever manages to become real and powerful in history, like the modern state, it did so for a deep, logical reason. It was a necessary step for the world spirit.
In his view, it had to happen.
Now, this is super important. We have to be really clear. Hegel was not talking about just any old state. He was not a defender of tyranny. His ideal state was a constitutional monarchy, a highly organized system with a monarch who was more of a symbol, laws that applied to everyone, and a professional bureaucracy, a civil service, chosen for their skills, not because of who their parents were.
And all of this brings us to what might be his most challenging idea of all, his definition of freedom. And let me tell you, it runs completely opposite to how most of us think about freedom today.
You know, we usually think of freedom in the way someone like John Locke did. It's about being free from the government, the right to be left alone to do our own thing. Hegel just throws that whole idea out the window. For him, an individual just following their own selfish whims isn't free at all. They're just a slave to their impulses. For Hegel, the community, the state, comes first. The individual is second.
So here's the bottom line. For Hegel, true freedom is about understanding the logical rules and systems of your society and then choosing to live your life in harmony with them. It means subordinating yourself to the bigger picture. Freedom isn't doing whatever you want, it's wanting to do what is required of you, your duty.
So as you can probably guess, these ideas, a predetermined march of history, freedom being found in obedience, they were explosive. They would go on to light intellectual fires and some very real fires all across the globe.
Hegel's thinking was so potent that it got picked up by groups that were mortal enemies. I mean, Karl Marx took the idea of the dialectic, but swapped out ideas for class warfare. Fascists love the concept of an all-powerful state that swallows up the individual. But at the exact same time, people who were defending modern liberal states also used Hegel to make their case. His ideas went everywhere.
But again, we have to be careful here. Even though his ideas were used to prop up totalitarian regimes, that's really a distortion of what he actually wrote. Hegel was terrified of too much central power. He saw what happened with the Reign of Terror in France. He actually argued for things like local governments and the rule of law specifically to stop a government from becoming all-powerful.
And so, in the end, we're left with Hegel's massive, profound challenge to us. When we go about our lives making choices, are we really free agents? Or are we all, in a way, like Napoleon on his horse, just unwitting players in a much, much bigger story, carrying out the will of a world spirit marching through time? That is the unsettling